So we just briefly mentioned some of the functions of the respiratory system, okay, which of course includes respiration, talking, making sounds, and controlling your pH levels. And when we look at this, you can actually see both of these. Okay, your larynx, that's your voice box, and your trachea, which is also present in this diagram here of the heart. Okay, so anatomically speaking, you had said, or we had discussed, why doesn't it collapse? And you had mentioned because there's cartilaginous rings on there. So just looking at this, okay, there are two tubes there. What would those two tubes actually be? That's one. So how do you know which one's which? Right. So this one that has these rings in this fashion, okay, that's composed of cartilage. That keeps that from collapsing, like you had mentioned. So remember, we had also said that which one is more anterior or to the front? The esophagus or the trachea? So this tube is the esophagus, this one's the trachea then. Right. So what happens is long up here, okay, there is a little flap of tissue. Oh, I put it in my pocket. That's why I couldn't find it. Okay, so here we have the trachea in front, the esophagus behind it, and then way up higher here, there's a little flap that goes like this. Okay, and when it goes down, it covers that trachea. But what forces that to do that? Is it just an automatic reflex? Yeah, whether it's liquids or chewed up solids, once you swallow that glottis or epiglottis. Now remember, it's lower down in your trachea. Yeah, it's your glottis, but your epiglottis will be much higher. Okay, and then again, when you swallow, it covers that, but it's not foolproof. For anyone who's had something happen to them, they will unfortunately have liquids go down. Well, it went down the wrong tube. Well, yeah, that's true. But for some reason, that flap just did not close tightly enough. Okay, but otherwise, yes, you can't. Sinuses, yes, they're up here. You can't see them, but you'd have to look inside. Bronchial tree, you can't see that. It is just starting to split right here on this heart diagram. Okay. And one of the functions that we really don't realize, it actually helps moisten the air, because for anyone who has problems, especially in the winter time, does anyone have to have a humidifier going? Because otherwise the air is so dry. Inside your nasal cavities, I do believe for some people that could be so sensitive that nosebleeds if the air is that dry. So it moistens the air, helps warm the air, which when it's cold outside, ideally it would be better to breathe through your nose, but sometimes that's not always an option for some of you who have to work outside in the wintertime. Sometimes it's just not conducive, or you just don't get enough air, especially if you're running around, to try to grab enough oxygen. Then you have to go through your mouth. But then one of the things that breathing through your nose, it warms that in the nasal chambers before it gets all the way down into your lungs. And sometimes if it is that cold, you take a deep breath and all of a sudden you have that cough reflex because it's so cold. And it's probably not good for us, but it's just some of the habits that we try not to do, but we do anyway. besides moistening the air, warming the air, is there any other reason why it may be better to breathe through your nose when it comes to air? What's this trying to maybe allude to? Can breathing through your nose keep you more healthy? And for those of you who said yes, why would that be? Or why may that be? It's not always foolproof. Yes, because this can help filter out some of the foreign particles that they don't get all the way down into your bronchi. And of course, it can only do so much. Soybean bins, who's ever had to clean one of them out? Those are horrible, aren't they? Okay. Did you have a mask or a handkerchief on? And sometimes that's still not enough, is it? Okay. Because then all of a sudden you may have to go blow your nose and it's just black that comes out of there. So, which is a good function to have, because what you're seeing in that black mucus would be down in your lungs otherwise. All right. So even the mucus, I think we view mucus as illness, but even for those of you who are in track, do you ever find yourself coughing and then you spit saliva and mucus out? And what does it look like? Is it discolored or is it clear? I hope it's clear, because if it's discolored, that means you'd have a bacterial infection. So one of the things that I believe happens in the human body when we're putting stress on there, it's an inflammatory response to running distances, and then that response creates mucus, and then you just spit it out, and it's clear. But if it is not clear, then again, that's bad. So one of the things that the mucus can do, we already talked about cleaning out your grain bin. The hairs in your nose and that mucus helps that, traps these materials and keeps them from going down into your lungs. Okay. Okay, we want to try to make sure we can get through as much as we can for our 4 seniors in here. Is that right? 2, yes, 4. For some reason, I was thinking 5. It's not the first time that we've seen this. As far as blood flow takes place, this happens in your legs. Okay, I want you to maybe think about that for a moment as you're writing. So does anyone know what we mean by a counter current exchange system, especially in your legs. Okay. One of the things that happens, okay, again, it's not that I like to keep reverting back or using farmers as an example. I think it's just the best way for you to make these types of correlations, okay? If you're outside working on the farm and you have to take your gloves off or mittens or anything to that effect, do your feet get cold? Do your fingers get cold? I think everyone would say, yes, that's going to happen. Because one of the things that takes place is the blood flow is slowed to these extremities because it's just so cold outside. Okay? But it's more important for this to take place in your legs if you have heat, warm blood going down your leg, which is the most common artery that it would be traveling down. Now, in your legs, not in your abdominal cavity, not in your pelvic cavity, we're in your legs. It's something that you would have observed up in the anatomy lab. What vessel was that? It was a femoral, okay? And if that is warm blood going down, what is going to be right next to it that's traveling up? I thought I heard it. If your femoral artery is going down, what's going to be right next to it? Femoral vein. So you have warm blood that is going down to your extremities, okay? But once it is pooling down in your leg, it is making its way back to the heart. How is that blood warmed up? Just by moving around, or is there maybe something else going on that we might see here? Where's the heat gonna, how does heat flow from warm to hot or hot to cold? Maybe we didn't talk about that when you took general chemistry, but I think we mentioned it when you juniors did. Well, one of the things, if you pick up a cold wrench, okay, one of the things that eventually will happen, that wrench will warm up, but it's taking all the heat from your hand, so it's moving from warm to cold. So what we see happening here, whether it's cold air coming in through your nose and these network of blood vessels will warm that oxygen before it gets into your lungs. Just like when blood is coming back to your heart, that heat is moving from your femoral artery over to your femoral vein. So that exchange system warms that blood before it gets back to your heart. Because that's one of the things, your heart really can't tolerate a whole cascade of effects of temperature dropping. Okay? If the blood is too cold when it comes back, I believe it can put a person into shock. And that's one of the things that happens that medical science finally figured out, that should someone be in a cold setting, you don't just immerse them into hot water, okay? Because one of the things, what did we say? What happens to you when it's really cold outside? What do your extremities start to do? You start to lose feeling in there, and it starts to get cold. Why might that be? What's your blood flow doing, do you think? Is it slowing down? It might not be that it's stopping, but it's certainly slowing down. You're going to try to keep your core as warm as you can. So that's why blood flow stops or slows down to your extremities. But if a really cold person gets placed into hot water, what do you think all of those smaller blood vessels are going to do really quick if they're immersed in hot water? If they're really constricted to conserve heat, then all of a sudden what happens if they're in cold water? They're going to expand, and that's happening throughout the entire body. If that happens too quickly enough, the blood pressure is really going to drop. Okay, so that can cause probably cardiac arrest. That's what we mean putting them into shock. So therefore, it's more important to warm that blood more slowly, and that's kind of what happens here. It's a slow effect of warming either oxygen or blood in the body. So then one of the things, if you really wanted to be specific, you could say, I've got pharyngitis. That's not a real medical term, but its counterpart certainly is. Okay? So this banner is covering up this P. This is supposed to say pharynx. Okay? So if someone says, I've got pharyngitis, then what might that mean? It's inflamed and it's sore, but in what area? Yeah, so it could be any matter of maybe different types of illnesses, strep throat, anything to that effect, but we don't say pharyngitis. But its counterpart, we may do that. What is the pharynx's counterpart, perhaps? The larynx. And therefore, if your voice box is inflamed, okay, then you're talking about laryngitis, which, has anyone ever gone through a phase where maybe if unfortunately you're sick in your home and you don't talk a whole lot for a couple of days, then you come back to school and start doing this a lot? What do you notice? Has anyone ever happened to anybody? Might feel your throat. It happens to probably other staff members a lot in the fall. Okay? Because typically, if you're not talking a lot all summer long, like for instance in my case, if I'm working at the golf course in Del Rapids, really don't do a whole lot of talking when you're sitting on a mower or a piece of equipment. And we're doing that all summer long, and then come back here in the fall, now all of a sudden you're talking all day long. It has an effect on your larynx, and it becomes inflamed because it's just not used to that. So the laryngitis is an inflammation, again, of the larynx. And that's where, over excessive talking. But some people can just do this all day long and it doesn't bother them. That's maybe what happened to this skeleton here, because I think this is a female skeleton because of the pelvis and the enlarged zygomatic arch and the strong mandibular condyles here. Lots of muscle on there for doing this. Yeah, maybe not. Okay. My apologies, ladies. I shouldn't do that. But you two aren't helping because you're laughing. Because maybe it's true or because it's funny. It's funny. Yeah. Oh, okay, well, maybe. But anyway, again, my apologies, ladies. Okay, moving on. Let's see where this puts us. I want to do this one for sure, because again, we're running short on time here. Yeah, let's get through the true and the false vocal cords, and then that'll be it. No, just a normal exam. Mhm. Okay, and I want to get through this one. Oh man, there's a lot more of the true vocal cord. Let's try to get through the true vocal cords then. No, we got rid of the cat or cats, so that would eliminate that of any diagram exam.
Where do you take them to?
They're gone. That's all we need to know. I thought the false vocal cords came after this. It's actually the true. So I think at the end of this slide, that is a good place to stop. Then tomorrow we'll start talking about the true vocal cords, which means, as you can see, sound will originate. And I don't know why there's that classification, all other than it's just correlated to that of sound. Okay, so we will catch up to you next time.